Welcome to Victims View, a show produced by the Solicitor General's Office. I'm Carmen Smith, the Solicitor General. The Solicitor General's Office prosecutes misdemeanor cases in state court, and we work with various agencies to assist the victims of crime. Today we're talking with Jacqueline Bunn, Executive Director of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, otherwise known as CJCC. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Carmen.
Now, just for our viewers' sake, give us a general background of what is the CJCC?
Well, the CJCC serves as the statewide clearinghouse for criminal justice information and research. We also work to develop criminal justice legislative and executive policy proposals. And we serve in an advisory capacity to the governor on issues that impact the criminal justice system.
And what is your role there?
I am the executive director, and I basically handle the day-to-day operations, oversee employment matters, and just work as the administrator.
And I understand you're the new director, is that right?
I am. I started July 1st.
Wow.
And I'm terribly excited. It is a gubernatorial appointment. The governor appointed me to this position, and I think I'm going to have a great time with it.
Well, tell us a little bit about the council itself. How many members are on the council?
Well, the council is made up of 24 members. Some of them serve based upon their current position. For example, there is someone from the GBI, there's someone from public safety. Because of the position that they hold, they're actually on the council. And then there are some that are actually appointed by the governor. There are actually 24 members, 10 are gubernatorial appointments.
And how do the other people I guess work together? Is there as a hierarchy? Is there a president and vice president? How is it?
There is, and they meet a couple of times several times a year. And one of the things they do is we have a board that handles claims that have been denied when someone has applied for services, and some of the board members are assigned to that. They're on various committees.
Well, what about the location? Do you have those meetings all over the state or just here in Atlanta?
They can take place around the state. It really depends on the members and what's convenient for them.
Well, I understand that also with that large of a group, is it open to the public? Can anyone come to these meetings?
Yes.
So it's open to the public?
Yes.
All right. And if people wanted to find out more information about CJCC, do you have a phone number?
We have a website. They can contact cjcc.ga.gov on the website, or they can call our number, which is 404-657-2222.
And in that respect, I understand that you're still located in Fulton County, though.
We are. Our physical office is located in the State Bar Building, right downtown in Atlanta.
But you serve all of Georgia.
We do, and we actually do seminars around the state because after getting to CJCC, I said we're one of the best kept secrets in state government. A lot of citizens don't even know that we exist and that these resources are there for them. Hence, I'm on your show trying to spread the word.
And I know that that's an awesome task for you. Have
Yes.
you found yourself traveling a lot throughout the state?
Not so much in the state just yet. That's my next goal. I actually attended a conference in Chicago earlier this month, meeting with other comparable agencies from around the country, just to talk about the status of criminal justice in this country. And we had roundtable discussions trying to find a way to improve just how we handle criminal justice in this country.
And I understand you probably work with a variety of agencies, like prosecutors, like, shelter victims. What other agencies do you work with?
Well, the thing is, we are the administrative agency. We handle the funding for several federal grants and also some state grants as well. So it's a combination of agencies that we would work with.
And that's, statewide, there's always a need to help victims all over the state.
Always.
And we can get into the details of that later. But I also wanted to ask you about just as far as what authority you have as an administrating agency for, I assume, grants and that sort of thing.
Well, okay, the federal funding or the state funding would come to our agency, and then other agencies would put in proposals. They're viewed as sub-grantees, essentially. They make application for the funding, and then we would distribute the money to those other entities and ultimately oversee to make sure that the money is being spent properly.
And that's what I really think that the public needs to be aware of, that you do have that responsibility, and that is a very serious responsibility to have, considering all the need that there is in the state for this funding.
Well, and you're talking about millions of dollars, so of course there's a potential for fraud, and so we're trying to oversee and make sure that the money that's being expended is actually being used for the purposes that it was designed for.
Well, with that said, I'm sure you're not just a one-woman show. Do you have a staff?
I do. I actually have a staff. There are about 60 employees, and it's divided up. We have a unit that handles specifically victim services. We have a unit that handles the grants, and then we also have a statistical analysis component as well, because one of the things we're charged with doing is not only funding these programs, but making sure that they're effective, and part of doing that is doing an analysis. We've got accountability courts now that we help fund, and we're taking a look at them right now. We're doing a study just to see how effective they are.
And I would imagine that as legislation changes every year, that would also have an effect on what different programs, et cetera, that you would also have to engage in.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the programs we've been funding for years are Drug Task Force. We're also doing a study right now to evaluate the effectiveness of those task forces.
I had no idea you did that as well.
Yes,
that's news
it's a
to me.
key component of it, absolutely.
Does that have anything to do with the accountability courts that you mentioned earlier?
Well, the study that we're doing,
yes.
We sent out a survey to the courts trying to, with specific questions tailored to try to determine just how effective they have become, and I'm looking forward to the results of that study.
And I'm sure that with that kind of study going on, that there's a lot of information that you'll have to gather, a lot of work that has to go into the final report.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
So I was wondering, when you do these kinds of studies, again, how much participation do you actually get? Because I know just within the Georgia Association of Solicitors General, sometimes when we send out surveys to get information, the response is not usually that great.
Well, for us, it is a little different because one of the components of receiving the grant is a requirement that if you are given a survey, you participate in the survey. So we have been fortunate in that the response to our surveys are typically pretty good.
So there is an incentive there.
Oh, yeah, there is. Absolutely.
Well, that means that you'll probably get more data, and it would be more effective study when you get
and
that
more
much
meaningful, because the whole point of it is to make sure that we're trying to be good stewards over the money that is being provided.
And you mentioned millions of dollars now. Is that coming from state funds or federal funds?
It's a combination. We have federal funding, but we also have the victims piece, which comes from state funding.
And you have to administer that throughout?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And there's also a piece where, with the accountability courts, that was from the governor's initiative, that the legislature actually carved out funding specifically for the accountability courts. So it can come from various sources.
But being such a large state, when you have to consider the needs of the various counties within the state, for example, with the accountability court, there's a finite amount of money that is to be, awarded.
Correct.
And that is a challenge, I would imagine.
It can be, and what I tell people is, I said, the pie is finite, and everybody wants a slice of the pie, but you're trying to determine which programs will be best, are best for the state and for the citizens. And so there are times when people may not get the funding that they would like, but we try to accommodate as best we can, making sure that the resources are going to a meaningful program.
And I would imagine the challenge further is we have such a diverse state. We have rural areas, we have urban areas, and the needs are different.
They are, absolutely.
So I would imagine that is a real challenge for you to decide who should get the award, who shouldn't get the award of funds, especially when you don't know exactly what the other funding resources will be, even though it may be a good program.
Well, one of the things we've been looking at, and one of the things they talked about at the conference that I attended in Chicago, was that, we're now looking more at evidence-based determinations, where you look at statistics, you look at where the crimes are occurring, you look at where the real need is based on statistical data, not just, shooting in the dark.
And I know that is a very good way of looking at things, because how do you know really what's going on until you actually do some sort of analysis of that?
Correct.
Well, we're going to take a quick break, But stay tuned, because when we come back, we're going to learn more about the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. Welcome back to Victim's View. I'm talking to Jacqueline Bunn, Executive Director of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. Now, we had spoken earlier about grants. Could you explain that a little bit? Is it to certain agencies or people, or how do you administer those grants?
Okay. The funding will come for the federal grants. It will come from Washington, from the Federal Justice Department. We have a couple of federal grants that we administer. We have the Edward Bunn Memorial, or it's also called the Bunn JAG program, VOCA, which is the Victims of Crime Act, and also Stop Violence Against Women Act, called VAWA, the Residential Substance Abuse Treatment Grant, Project Safe Neighborhoods, and the Sexual Assault Services Program. And there are also some state grants that flow through our office.
I think I'm more familiar with VAWA and VOCA because we do a lot of domestic violence cases in the solicitor's office statewide.
Correct.
And it's one of those things that, it's an ongoing issue, is how do we help victims more?
Correct.
So with both of those grants, that would be something that prosecutors' offices as well could apply for, those funds as well.
Correct.
Well, what about I think you mentioned that when you administer these grants, there is a competition for them, correct?
There absolutely is. We have the sub-grantees apply, and then they're reviewed by members of the council who are on a particular committee, on the committee for the review of those grants, and they make the ultimate determination and recommendation.
Is there an opportunity to have some sort of oral exchange? Is there a hearing?
Typically
or is this all
not.
paperwork?
It's pretty much paperwork. We put out the guidelines, and then they respond, and our staff works really diligent to pour through. I mean, sometimes we have hundreds of applicants. So you can imagine the amount of time it takes to go through those and to try to give them a fair hearing. But that's just one piece, because the other piece of what we do really relates specifically to victims, and it's a compensation program that's funded through the state, through state funding, and through that program, individuals can actually apply if they've been a victim of a crime.
So let's talk about that a little bit more. What would make you eligible for victims' compensation?
And this is under the Georgia Crime Victims Compensation Program. If you personally have been a victim of a crime, if you witness a crime and have an injury, then you can make application. The maximum that you would be able to recover would be like $25,000, but we cover various things. For example, we even cover funeral expenses. We cover medical expenses. We cover mental treatment. If you have to go to a psychologist or psychiatrist, some of those expenses might be covered. But we're almost like the place of last resort, though, because if you already have medical insurance, then you wouldn't be eligible for it. But if you don't, then this is an avenue that you might want to explore.
And you mentioned that your staff was divided in units, so I would imagine you have people that would explain these benefits to any applicants who might want to apply.
Absolutely. They will walk you through the process. And the important thing, though, is that if you have been a victim, that you apply as soon as possible so that we can get you in the system. Because there are timelines, too. I mean, you can't wait 10 years and then try to apply,
Okay.
You need to do it as soon as possible.
And I would imagine that amount of funding is a finite number as well. So it's, I would assume that it also depends on how many people apply as to whether those funds would be depleted.
Correct.
That kind of thing.
Correct. We can't give money we don't have. So
that's the difficult part.
Yes, indeed.
I am sure.
Yes,
I also was kind of surprised, and I guess I shouldn't have been, as how few, or in my opinion, few shelters that we have throughout the state. And as a person who has volunteered in shelters and tried to, especially those shelters for women who are fleeing from domestic violence.
Right.
there are so many different, I guess, volunteers, et cetera. But when it comes to making application and asking for grants, I think it's a bit of a challenge for them to do those and to meet those deadlines.
Well, I think the other piece of it, though, is a lot of that funding is federal funding, and as you can imagine, as the funding dries up, there's just less money to spread around, unfortunately. And that's just the hardcore reality. The need is great, but the resources are not necessarily comparable to the actual need.
And I was wondering also, when it comes to that challenge of rural versus urban, is that taken in consideration, I guess the community in which the particular program is involved? Does that play a part in the role of selecting who will get the awarded funds?
We look at all of that. We look at all of that. And again, the goal is to see where the greatest need is and try to target the funding where, we think the need would be best served.
And I would assume also that you can get a lot of this information on your website.
You absolutely can, cjcc.ga.gov.
And I was wondering also, when it comes down to the actual paperwork,
correct.
Can you get forms on applications and that kind
information
of thing?
Is actually on the website, but we also have victims advocates who are there to assist if you need help. They will step in and try to provide, additional assistance where needed.
Oh, I didn't realize that was another unit of your office?
It is, within the victim services, yes.
Okay. Well, that's very helpful then, especially when a lot of people nobody asked to be a victim.
No.
So when it happens to them, they have a lot of questions and a lot of things they've just heard from hearsay. So it's wonderful to learn that they can go to your website, contact your office, and hopefully get some assistance with
Absolutely.
With all
and
of
I
that.
will tell you, I've only been at CJCC since the beginning of July, but I have found a staff that is very caring, and they are very much concerned about the people that they serve, and they really have a heart for people. And I'm very pleased with the level of care that I see and the efforts that are made on behalf of the victims in this state.
That is wonderful to hear, because one of the things that is very frustrating for citizens, I know, when they call Fulton County, and they don't know exactly who to call and that sort of thing. And it's wonderful that I can, toot my own horn, and we have a wonderful victim assistance office.
Yes.
That they just need resources. And we try to help them with that process with victims' compensation and any other things that they might be appropriate for them to apply for. Sometimes they don't want to hear the answers that we may give them about not being eligible. So I'm happy to hear that you have some staff some people on your staff who can more fully explain.
And try to help them understand, because, we can pay for medical expenses, funerals, counseling, economic support, and even crime scene cleanup in some instances. But again, you have to fill out the proper paperwork, and you have to establish that you're eligible for these benefits.
And I wondered also, we're encountering a problem, I guess, with a breakdown in language barriers and that sort of thing. Have you experienced much of that?
That is a concern, and we do have an actual policy, an internal policy in place to deal with people whose language may be different. We've identified people within our office who, for example, speak Spanish. We now have someone who speaks Chinese, so.
That is always helpful. And then we have to think also about our senior population who may, again, need certain resources that they're not aware of. So again, with my victim assistance office, one of the things that we do is we share with them other resources as far as the state goes. And I think that it's wonderful to have organizations like yours in place, but unless the word gets out about them, then it's really not serving the victims as much as we can.
You're absolutely right.
And
if no one knows that you exist, how can they come for the assistance? So thank you for helping us spread the word, Solicitor Smith.
That's one of the things that
really
we
appreciate
want to
this
do,
opportunity.
And that's the purpose of the show, is to provide those resources for folks. And there are a lot of good-hearted people who want to start their own nonprofits. They want to do it right. And it's wonderful to have some place that they can go to sort of coordinate those efforts. Because one of the things that you would hate to happen is for somebody to have a passion for helping other people and they have no idea where they can get resources from or who to talk to.
One of the other things we've tried to do is to do seminars around the state, and they've been very well received. We're going to do some in the fall as well, not just in the metropolitan Atlanta area, but also in Middle Georgia, South Georgia, to go out and actually reach out in the communities and try to explain to people that these resources are there and how they go about tapping into these resources.
So would the seminars be regional, or?
We have done them on a regional basis.
And would they be more focused on exactly what CJCC has to offer, or a specific, like, starting an accountability court or something like that? Are there specific topics around those
seminars we've done have been more victims focused.
And that's been throughout the state?
Throughout the state. Throughout the state.
And planning more of those?
We are planning more because we want to get the word out there. The other thing we're working on now is branding our agency.
What does that mean?
Creating a brand, essentially, so that when people hear the name CJCC, they know and recognize what it means.
As opposed to saying, what does that stand for?
What is CJCC? What do they do? Yeah, we want people to when they think of victims advocacy, we want them to identify it with CJCC.
Oh, you've got your work cut out for you.
We really do, and we recognize that, but we think we have lofty goals. We do indeed.
And do you have any other lofty goals or plans that are coming up?
For now, just trying to figure out if, in fact, we need to develop any kind of legislative proposals for next year. We're looking at that and looking at how we can assist the governor's office in just making our criminal justice system as effective and efficient as it can be. The governor's initiative, one of his initiatives is to have a reentry program, and he created an office of reentry, and we'll be working with them as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah, because that's a big piece of the puzzle too.
It is, it is. Well, I want to thank Jacqueline Bunn for being here today. I'll be back with some final thoughts about the CJCC. The Criminal Justice Coordinating Council has served the state of Georgia since 1981. The CJCC is a resource for victims of crime and agencies that provide services for those victims. Its partnership with agencies such as the Department of Corrections, the Georgia Commission on Family Violence, and the Prosecuting Attorneys Council is another example of how we can accomplish much more when we work together. I want to thank Jacqueline Bunn, Executive Director of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. Thank you for watching Victims View. We'll see you next time.